if the community is thriving, the small business is thriving. If the small business is thriving, the community is thriving. They employ those that are living in their community. They give back. They volunteer in their community. They tend to be involved in the local government as well. And so they are more than just the backbone. They are the glue to our economy here and our community.
Too often, planning around business development focuses narrowly on generating the most profit and not on providing for the people, community, institutions, and natural resources. These approaches view marginalized communities as lacking or unskilled, while inviting big business in as a way of revitalizing communities. These new businesses may bring opportunity, but they can often come with costs, including undermining or displacing locally owned businesses or not guaranteeing good jobs for local residents. In the face of many challenges, organizations find creative ways to build inclusive business practices. A lot of this work looks like organizations removing the barriers that prevent their communities from being able to participate in a shared economy where their skills, values, and cultures are represented.
I would really love for people to understand that the nail salon industry is unique. There are amazing, incredible people that are working, that are supporting the industry, and actually it's their economic livelihood, really, for the Vietnamese community across the country, really. And so what's important for people to understand is that the issues that the community faces are so intersectional. Within this one workplace, there's reproductive justice issues, being exposed to the toxins that they're working with every day. There are economic justice issues in terms of the way workers are treated and not having breaks or having paid sick leave. There are immigrant rights issues, immigrant and refugee rights issues. Because of language barriers, there just is not information readily available on how to make their workplace more just and more fair. And so there's so many intersectional issues that are happening in the nail salon industry, and so that's what I want to highlight and focus on. The anti-Asian racism that's been happening over the last 3 years, our members are able to connect what happened in Atlanta with massage spa workers with themselves as nail salon workers because they are working class Asian women who are immigrants and refugees. During COVID, the nail salon industry in California was amongst the first to close and one of the last to open. This is a community that is invisibilized. Because of language barriers, they aren't prioritized, they are not seen literally. And so that makes this work even more important.
The pandemic really highlighted that throughout the state and throughout the nation. There were, I believe the number is over 40% of those that didn't qualify or weren't able to apply for the huge California COVID relief grant that we had here in California was because they didn't have their financials in order. People didn't know how to do that and they weren't prepared for that. They didn't know what financial statements were.
And so the Inland Empire decided we also needed to invest in the street vendor community who was only growing rapidly every year and just basically skyrocketed when the pandemic started 3 years ago. The same street vendors are the people we fight for Health for All, to avoid them being detained and deported, to help them get housing resources, other health resources, or support them, with mutual aid efforts that we've done, I think, since we started 15 years ago.
I remember working with these two sisters that had a nonprofit feeding the homeless as well as a DV center. And they had ran it successfully for over 10 years. They had huge support from the community and they didn't even know how to do an operational budget. And so I remember trying to help them get just a couple $1,000s to help them continue doing the good work that they were doing already in our community. And at that time, everything was closed, and sitting in the Riverside parking lot on pavement with them at their car, teaching them how to do an operational budget, explaining the ins and outs and what that looks like and how it works, and explaining to them how important it was that they needed to get their financial statements in order, and actually what a paper trail means, so that they could get other grants or they could get loans and capital. They were not prepared for that. They operated completely with cash. They never used their business bank account. They always used their personal. And so explaining to them the importance of separating their finances, how imperative it was to not operate on cash, and how if they ever wanted to continue to grow and scale, they really needed to buckle down and learn about their financials.
A solidarity economics approach to community business development starts at the ground level to identify and harness the talents and resources within the community, names the systemic and historical challenges that have led to underinvestment, or in some cases, de-investment, and concentrates on strategically connecting communities to the economic opportunities in the surrounding region. This approach begins with finding and building connections and supporting local initiatives, rather than assuming that lack of economic development is a gap that needs to be filled. A solidarity economics approach also recognizes that healthy economies are diverse and dynamic. They include business drivers like industry and trade, but they also nurture the small businesses and services on which community members depend, including street vendors.
So 4 or 5 years ago, I lose count now, when folks were like, we need to do something to stop enforcement against street vendors. We need to make sure that they're not ticketed and that their items don't get confiscated. I thought about, well, let's go and meet them where they're at, right? At the corner from the Garcia Center, or the corner from the church, or outside of church where a lot of us attend service, just talking to them first, right? And we learned right away that many folks don't even know where like the local finance or business office is at. Business registration can do a lot more to ensure folks know, steps 1 through 20 to formalize their businesses. The county, San Bernardino County and Riverside County have a lot of work to do to also make the information not only accessible online, but on paper, whether it be through popular education, making magazines or zines as we see them today, providing the step-by-step process for folks to formalize the business through, I think, like 10 plus permits that we know sidewalk vendors need today. But at the same time, to understand why it's required, folks don't fully understand why we need to pay taxes on top of the sales tax that we already pay for the items that they're producing on the street. So a lot of vendors already see themselves as part of the economy in the informal way. They already buy, hundreds of products from our local stores, anywhere from the IE and even Los Angeles. And we need to be able to see that as investments that they're making in the local economy, as well as the rent and the other expenses they pay to survive here day to day in our region. But I think that we've always talked about popular education, technical assistance, literally one-by-one assistance, because people sometimes don't have access to the information, but also don't read and write. And so you need someone to really guide them through those 20 steps to get even sometimes the first permit. But many of the permits, we can also reduce through policy. And we realized through talking to vendors that there's a way to reduce some of the permit requirements to ensure that the startup costs are not as high.
Part of what these organizations have done so well when it comes to employing the solidarity economics framework is hone in on building strong pathways into growing business opportunities for local people. These pipelines can be and have been strategically built into economic development plans with inclusion in mind.
There's definitely a need to include micro businesses that are immigrant and refugee owned when thinking about regional planning, economic development planning. So just an example is that when we started to do labor trainings and workers' rights education, nail salon owners were actually really excited to get that information because they had never received it in Vietnamese. And so they were like, wow, we actually know what we're supposed to be doing now. We didn't know what the labor laws were before. And so that's just a very clear example. We were actually really hesitant to start doing these trainings on workers' rights because we were afraid that they were going to be very resistant. We don't want these trainings. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to turn my workers against me? When instead it was the other way around, and they really appreciated those trainings.
Not only is it my mission, but the mission of Small Business Majority to make sure that business owners never experience that again, that they have just the basics of financial understanding so that they could be prepared for another pandemic, or they could be prepared to continue thriving in our economy. This story about those two sisters is still ingrained in me because I remember sitting in the hot sun in the parking lot over their car, teaching them about an operational budget, explaining to them how to get their financials in order. And it was so apparent to me at that moment in over 100-degree weather that this is something that was really needed. And this is something that we need not only in our state, in our city, in our state, but across the U.S.
I think that all the different grants that are now available through the local, state, and even federal government. And with that, I think there's so much sitting at the table that we need to take an opportunity to invest in. And so we're happy to continue to build partnerships with local government, but always to include the street vendor voice at the table, whether it's through organizations like us, but the vendors as well. We don't want to just be seen as folks with dollar signs on our foreheads, but also to see the cultural contributions that they bring to a region like San Bernardino.